What's up, good people? In partnership with WYTV7 Christian Broadcaster Network, this is When Men Open Up, a show where we are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique.
I'm Dexter.
And the topic for today is when women molest boys. We're going there today.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems like, based upon our conversation, we wanted to go in this route for a few different reasons. And one of those many reasons is because it seems like this is something that we normally don't speak about too much. And when it come down to sex offenders, when it come down to pedophiles and so forth, we mainly focus on men.
Yeah.
You know, and typically for different reasons, we don't go into that. We don't necessarily look at women as being sex offenders or pedophiles and so forth. And we really want to get into that. So, but why did we go into the direction of the topic? You know, age ain't nothing but a number.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think there was, you know, with the current controversy with, you know, R. Kelly and, you know, that song that he wrote for Aaliyah many years ago, age ain't nothing but a number. I think, you know, with the connotation of what he's going through, and the alleged crimes or whatnot, we wanted to explore from the vantage point of why don't we speak to it as it relates to happening to boys, you know, from the standpoint of an older woman engaging in a sexual activity with a young boy. And I think it's really counterculture, you know, to what a lot of us are willing to really talk about. You know, we don't talk about it very rarely do we talk about it. And so when you hear about it, it's almost like, well, you know, what should my response be?
Exactly.
You know, and I think because we don't have these conversations, you know, it almost seems foreign to bring it up, you know, but the reality is that it happens. And we need to give attention to what our response is and what our response should be when it does, you know, take place.
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that needs to happen more. It's a discussion that needs to happen more. And we typically, you know, teach on this topic a little differently when we're teaching our young girls versus our young boys.
Exactly.
And, you know, we can think back even in, you know, I remember in middle school and in high school, when boys used to, you know, brag about, hey, you know, I had sex with someone who was 20 years old, or it was with a babysitter, or with an adult, or she, you know, performed oral sex on me, or whatever the case may be. And some of the guys, you know, we hyped it up, or we probably just all like, you know what, he just lying, or whatever the case may be. And during that time frame, or with that mind frame at that age, you know, we didn't really think too much of it. Now, when I got to a certain age, I thought back and said, I really thought about that, and just told myself, man, if all those guys in middle school and high school were actually telling the truth, they admitted to being molested and raped. And I didn't really, it took me a few years, you know, even in my 20s to really think back and just say, and it just really hit me one day, you know. And the thing is, with some of those guys, based upon their understanding, based upon us not really teaching them in certain ways, you know, for many of them, they thought, you know what, that's a good thing, or in some way they just thought, you know what, that's a rite of passage.
Right as bad. I mean, that's you know, interesting that you went there and that you brought that up. You know, we did a talk on this about I think it was maybe conversation. I think it was Men and Unfaithfulness when we did it in December, and we were talking about the culture. And one of the things is that we agreed upon that culturally boys are exposed to sex. I won't say more than young girls are, but I think differently. You know, we're taught to, you know, almost be over sexualized. You know, there was a video I saw on Facebook one time when a little boy maybe was 10 years old and had a grown woman, you know, she was, you know, bouncing on him and stuff like that, and the whole audience was, you know, getting excited, clapping and stuff like that.
I remember.
Yeah,
that.
and my mindset was, what if that was a girl, 10 years old with a grown man, taking the shirt off, and would the response be the same? And so the reality is that we're introduced to sex differently, growing up. We're taught that even as young boys that you're, once again, the rite of passage, the introduction to manhood is only experienced once you go through with this act of having sex. And so when you're young, let's be truthful about it. You want to be considered the man amongst your peers, and so having sex, as a young person, is that badge of honor, and it only accentuates that badge of honor if it's a woman. If you got an adult woman that you can say, hey, I'm having sex with her, like your credibility is through the roof. But the reality is that why aren't we calling it what it is?
Most definitely.
Why aren't we calling it, pedophilia or molestation? Once again, I think it's because of the way we're introduced to sex, as it's the norm, and as a boy, you're expected to be doing this. So there's no problem with you having sex, even if the woman is much older than you. And so, we gotta, we have to look at this objectively and ask ourselves, why are we creating this double standard and allowing it to exist?
Yeah, and it's so many different reasons why, those boys have that understanding. And part of the reason how you just ended is that double standard. So let's focus on that for a little bit. There is a double standard when it comes down to men and women. And, based upon cultural beliefs, we typically look at women as those caregivers, those nurturers, and so forth. So we don't really expect that from women. If you had a daughter and I say, your daughter is very pretty and so forth, and I go on and on, we'll automatically begin to have our guard up, it's going to
be a problem.
Exactly. It's going to be a problem. But for women, we don't think anything of it. You get what I'm saying? And this is very problematic that we have this double standard, because boys, because of the way we view women in that light, I believe boys are very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable in a lot of different situations because we don't expect this from women. You get what I'm saying? Even when you look at statistics, I think I know for a fact, majority of, sex offenders they know the child. Yeah. They have some type of relationship with the child. You get what I'm saying? So we have to really just be careful with how we view pedophiles. We try to paint a certain image when it comes down to pedophiles and sex offenders. But the fact of the matter is, they can be educated, they can have degrees, they can have high profile careers and so forth. We just think, it must be something wrong with them, or they must be mentally ill, or they got to be crazy and so forth. But they look just like us. Yeah. They look just like us. So we have to really, really be careful, because if we don't really fix the way we are looking at, men and women, we're not going to have those conversations. Exactly. Because I don't remember, my father never told me about watching out for X, Y, and Z. You get what I'm saying? So I think a lot of boys, they're going to get caught up in certain boundaries being crossed, you know what I'm saying, and being validated, you know what I'm saying, and not be able to pinpoint it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Before we came on, before we went live, you and I were talking about it, and I said, culturally, when preparing for this conversation, I had to really look at it. I don't think we really know how to respond when we hear these stories, and I was sharing that, there's a guy I knew who, when he was a little boy, a grown woman in her 20s, sexually assaulted him, and, touched him and stuff like that. And when he took it to an adult, the adult was like, well, it won't happen again. That was the response, you know what I'm saying? And so nothing ever really happened. It was never he never got the closure from that experience.
Right.
And so what he ended up doing was he ended up thinking that that was the norm. You know, there's a good friend of mine growing up, you know, he had I think we were probably like 14, 15 at the time, had an experience with a woman in her 30s. And long story short, you know, there's a phrase, you know, terminology, you know, turned out. But anyway, he was sexually, you know, he was so caught up with this woman that, you know, she ended up pretty much kind of messing up his mind, you know what I'm saying? And I kind of vaguely remember that, you know, she was always like, you know, inviting him over, and he would have like alcohol and stuff like that. So he was like, yeah, you know, she's cool, you know, she's cool, you know, kind of created that really lenient environment and stuff like that. But what ended up happening is that once the sex, you know, that connection sexually ended, and he couldn't stimulate her mentally, and once again he's a teenager and didn't have the finances,
right.
You know, she ended that relationship. And so he was hurt, you know what I'm saying? And so what it was, he was traumatized how this woman abused him essentially. You know, she pretty much used him sexually. But here's the kicker. He actually, after that experience, I remember him saying that, you know, a young woman can't do anything for me. And so he ended up, his attraction was always to older women from that day, you know, because he had that exposure to, you know, that older woman. So, you know, this is serious. You know, at the end of the day, I use those two examples because those encounters actually introduce trauma to those guys' lives, and it actually kind of spelled itself out the same way in both of their lives. You know, they were both hypersexual, you know, and from the relational standpoint, they had a hard time relating to women their age, you know, because of these experiences with these older women, and because maybe women their age weren't, I guess, as advanced as, you know, women, these older women, you know, it just really did something to them mentally that, you know, I don't know rightly if they ever really recovered from that.
Right. You know what? That reminds me of, you know, a friend that I know. She shared with me that there was two guys that she dated in the past, and they both shared some situations that, you know, occurred in the past with some babysitters.
Yeah.
And whether they was 12 years old or maybe 14 years old, whatever the case may be, and, you know, she explains to them that, you know you was molested, you know you was raped.
Yeah.
And she said how both of them denied it. You know, they said, no, that didn't really happen because I wanted it. You know what I'm saying? I wanted it to happen. You know, and that's the confusion that some boys even have, even if they did want it.
Yeah.
See, because we don't have those conversations, they're not able to pick up on that behavior that they got to watch out on. You get what I'm saying? So even if they do want it, they're going to actually, you know, allow it to actually happen, or not just allow it to happen, but the women are going to actually be more successful at actually manipulating them. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
But, you know, she even said that, you know, they have this mindset that when they're speaking or when they talking with a woman or when they dating a woman, they automatically expect sex. You know, that's something that automatically happens. And, you know, she said, in her personal opinion, you know, she kind of tied that into that. I'm not really sure, but it's a possibility. I think another thing is because of the culture, you know, there's a lot of statistics that shows that this is very underreported, and it's underreported for so many different reasons. But, you know, a lot of boys are not going to report it, you know, and a lot of boys not going to report it because, you know what, I don't want to be viewed as weak. I don't want to be a quote unquote sissy. I don't want to be viewed as somebody being soft and I'm tattletelling and so forth. And, you know, that's a lot of pressure. But I think, you know, the reports are actually rising for whatever reason. I didn't look into that. And I think some boys are really finding the confidence to really report it. But it's showing that it's very, very common. you know, among boys. And a lot of them it's happening to a lot of them. And we have this culture where what happens in the house stays in the house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If it's my friend or if it's whoever that I know, you know, don't say anything about it. You get what I'm saying? And we're just shutting these boys that up and down, you know, and not allowing them to really express what's really going on. And that's very, very toxic, that they don't even have the voice in their house to even share, you know, this is what happened, or this is what's actually going on.
Man, that's so, you know, the friend of mine who I was talking to, and he was telling me how he shared this with an adult. One of the adults said, well, I don't see what the problem is, you know. And so imagine that, you know, you finally have the courage to, you know, because you already feel like something bad has happened, you know, and you got the courage to finally say something about it.
Right.
And, you know, and then the person that you confide in says, well, you know, I don't see anything wrong with it, you know. And so imagine what that does to your ability in the future to address issues. You know, one of the things we often talk about is how difficult it is to really talk about stuff we're dealing with. Well, that became his reason for being unable to share his stuff, because the person that he confided in pretty much devalued what it was he was sharing. You know, you spoke about there's a level of notoriety that comes once again with being with an older woman. So because of that notoriety, you know, the fact that once again everybody thinks that, you know, it's cool, you know, I don't see it as an issue, you know. And so of course I'm not going to say anything about it, you know. And I think that's when, you know, we have to be more observant as adults who recognize these things are going on. The challenge is that, you know, we're not always having these conversations. You know, one of our viewers brought up, we have to have the conversation about consent. You know, and just imagine if you're brought up thinking that, you know, sex is, you know, with an older woman is cool, then of course, you know, if someone says, hey, do you want to have sex with me? You know, you're probably going to say yes. But, you know, one of the things I'm reminded of is that, you know, growing up, I would hear adults say, we're friendly, but we're not friends. And the issue is that at the end of the day, we as adults are going to have to be adults in these situations. If I see a 30-year-old woman engaging in a very, you know, inappropriate relationship with a 12-year-old, there's no level of friendship that warrants that type of interaction. And so me as the adult in the situation, you know, I have to have the courage and the willingness to say something about that. Right. Because when we don't intervene, what we're doing is we're setting up the next, you know, generation of people to in the future talk about how they were traumatized and nobody saw it. You know, how they were traumatized and they shared and nobody said anything.
Yeah, I like that that word intervene. You know, we have to have the same alertness that we have for our daughters, for our girls as well. And whether, you know, they're in sports, they have a coach, tutor, whatever the case may be, we have to intervene. We have to, you know, be involved. You know, who are they really spending their time with? You know what I'm saying? Really getting to know them, really having a conversation and so forth. And really teaching them, I can't say this enough, really teaching them the same. We have to really, you know, we have this way of or trusting our boys that, you know what, they're boys, they're fine, they can handle themselves, but they can be manipulated just like anyone else. At the end of the day, they're still a child. You get what I'm saying? And because of this culture, they are even more likely to be pulled in. They are more likely to be manipulated. They are more likely for, you know, for that woman to say something and one thing after the next happens. I think we have to, you know, I see on, let's say on social media, when they'll share an article or a report how, you know, this teacher was having a sexual relationship, you know, with a boy when, you know, we use that language, you know, we got to really call it what it is. And I would see some of the comments, you know, and a lot of adults a lot of adults really just don't see it like this, man. And you'll see a lot of adults, they'll comment what? You know what?
Where
At that age,
yeah.
you know, that's what I wanted. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I don't see anything wrong because you know what? He got what he wanted. You know what I'm saying? And so forth and so forth. What we're saying is we're actually approving that behavior.
Exactly.
We're actually approving that it's okay for a woman to be a sex offender. It's okay for a woman, or it's acceptable for a woman to have a relation, you know, to molest and have a sexual quote unquote relationship with a younger man. And that's so problematic that, you know, they'll say something about that. You know, if the boy wanted it or initiated, there's nothing wrong with it, or most boys, you know, want to have sex with older women anyways.
Man, because I'm sure I've seen those the same, you know, posts, you know, especially it seems like maybe in the last 5 years, like a lot of these middle school boys were actually you know, impregnating the teachers and stuff. And I remember specifically a comment, somebody was like, man, where were those teachers at when I was growing up? And I'll be honest with you, they were actually there. You know what I'm saying? It just they existed when you were growing up. You know, let's not be naive. You just weren't messing with them, but they existed. You know, and the sad thing, because I shared this with you before, that you know, and I was, you know, late teens. I was like maybe 16, turning 17, and you know, an older woman was like, "Hey, I could teach you a whole lot," you know, and I was like, well, I ain't trying to learn, you know what I'm saying? You know, I was real sarcastic when I was a, you know, teenager, but the reality is that, you know, there's like this weird connection with, like I'm going to be your teacher, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I'm going to introduce you to some stuff you ain't never experienced before. And that becomes like the manipulative, you know, the tool of manipulation, you know, where it kind of piques your curiosity that, you know, you know, you're going to, you know, heighten my prowess with, you know, younger women because I've had this experience with the older woman, you know, and I think that is one of the things that also kind of, really messes up a lot of young boys, you know, young men as it relates to this particular topic.
Most definitely, man. And I just want to go over some, you know, some quick statistics real quick. I think one of them, only 14% of children who suffer sexual abuse were violated by the unknown perpetrator. And like we stated before, you know, only 14% are from unknown perpetrators. 2004 college study of 284 men and boys, which found that 43 out of the 284 men had been sexually coerced into unwanted intercourse, with 95% of the perpetrators reported as being female. Another one, U.S. Census Bureau, which revealed that in 2012, a study of a percentage women and men who admitted to forcing sex found that 43.6% of that subset were women, compared to 56% of men. So it's just to show, you know, cause I like to, you know, highlight certain statistics. It's just to show that it happens much more than we think.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And we got to really be on our P's and Q's when it come down to our boys, because especially in this culture, you know what? A lot of boys they want it. You know what I'm saying? And if they think it's cool and they think they if they want it, you know what I'm saying, they're gonna be subject to those situations, into those scenarios. And you know what? They're very, very exposed and vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, once again, we keep using the word culture. We really have to examine what type of attitudes and behaviors we choose to encourage, you know, and as long as we keep encouraging, once again, that boys and men, you know, young men engage in sex early, you can expect this to be the norm, you know. We are not disgusted when we hear about an adult woman messing with a young male, you know.
Right.
We don't have the same energy, you know, that we do when we hear about the grown man messing with the young lady. We don't. And if we don't change that, then we can expect that things like this will always happen. You know, once again, that kind of bothered me when I was talking to the guy, and he said that, you know, he shared this, and you know, the people was like, well, you know, that's a good thing, you know, because here he is late, you know, in his, you know, 40s, and he's like, hey man, you know, this has been my reality for over 30 years, you know, And so over 30 years, it has impacted his view on women, and I imagine that it's contributed to, a number of failed relationships.
Yeah.
He's a divorcee and stuff like that. So, just that encounter, we don't know how much it really changed the course of his life. I think one of the things is that when you look at sex as just sex and you don't factor in the ramifications, the mental stuff and the emotional connection, it is really hard to validate, what the person has gone through. But once again, I can only imagine the emotional toil of a 10-year-old, exposed to an adult woman who's touching him, you know what I'm saying? Because now, what if you're, committed to the hands of another adult? Are you concerned that they're going to touch you? Maybe if they're just doing something innocent, like trying to hug you, are you seizing up in fear because the last time somebody got that close to you, it became something sexual of nature? And so we can't take the liberty of dismissing, these people's stories.
Most definitely. And I just want to highlight the parents one more time. It's funny because I think back when I was in middle school and, and maybe we'll be in the store with my mom or wherever, and she'll run into somebody that she knows, and they'll make a comment towards me, probably about my looks or whatever the case may be. And, she'll make a comment as well, like, don't think about it, what I'm saying, or watch yourself or whatever the case may be. And I usually just think, and I usually just think, man, she just doing the most, man, until, but I got a little mature, man. I really just thought, what, she really caught on to it, you know what I'm saying? And she saw some things that I didn't really catch on to, you get what I'm saying? And, once again, women are pedophiles as well, what I'm saying? It's not just men, but we have to really teach our boys what behaviors to look out for, what are some red flags, and we have to really just be involved. You're never too involved when it come down to your child. Whether you have a son or a daughter, you're never too involved. This happens with someone that has some type of relationship with your child. And you need to be involved and understand who your child is around. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's a teacher, coach, whatever the case may be, we just have to be on our P's and Q's and not be too trusting. You get what I'm saying? We have to really just be involved because it's much of it is our fault to why our boys are vulnerable. Much of it is our fault why our boys are vulnerable and exposed. You get what I'm saying? But we have a poll that we really want some of the guys to participate in on our Facebook page. And we asked, if you were, I think we said before the age of 16, if you ever had a sexual experience with someone that was 4 years or older than you, yes or no. So that poll is posted on our Facebook. So go ahead and participate in that. And, this is something that happens much more than we think. We just want people to understand that. But please continue to have this conversation. You ever had this? This conversation can never happen too early with your son. It can never happen too early. And we have to dismiss this misconception that it's too early to have these talks with our sons, because it's never too early. There's too many stories out there where people will say, this happened to me when I was 3. This happened to me even younger than that. And we got to let them know, because the older that we wait, we're just allowing them to be exposed and vulnerable.
The longer you wait, the less likely the conversation is to happen. And I'll be 100% honest with you, because we talked about this in the past. Like, look, the sex conversation was very awkward between me and my father. You know what I'm saying? It was so awkward that it really didn't happen, until, I got a little older and I was already, out there doing it. So it was just kind of like, well, just be safe. You know what I'm saying? And so it's more than just, the protection from STDs. It's also, what are you emotionally opening yourself up to? And the reality is that, as a young man, what I'm saying, I made myself, emotionally, I was messing myself up And so, no, I think in this space, you got to be mindful that once again, when you're talking about these age discrepancies and stuff like that, you know, it's not just sex, it's more to it. Because once again, that same friend was emotionally, he was messed up. Psychologically, he was messed up, you know, went into depression, you know, wondering why, you know, this woman had given him all this attention, and just like that, you know, cut everything off, you know. And so, you know, and it took him a very long time to recover from that. And so, you know, we have to be willing to have the discussions, no matter how awkward it is. You know, ask about the interactions that your sons are having with people. You know, ask them what's going on, and give them the safe space to talk about it. No matter, you know, if they sound weird talking about it, or they're unable to get to the conclusion, give them the space to talk about it. You know, and I think as you do that, we can better safeguard, you know, relationships that people are having with our sons.
And to add on to that, because I want to be specific with giving them the space, because it shouldn't be a judging atmosphere. You get what I'm saying? So allow them to really express themselves, because if they're comfortable with expressing themselves, the more you know. If we get so caught up with demonizing them and saying you're wrong for thinking this way, and so forth and so forth, they're going to hold stuff from you. You get what I'm saying? Because part of how they do think is based upon things that happen outside of the home. So that's something that we have to always remember as well. So have that safe space for them to open up and so forth. Now, share why is there a double standard? Why are we not highlighting this issue? You know, what are some things that we missed in this video, in this episode? Share that with us and help us get this conversation out by just sharing this video. And if you have anything that you want to share with us, any upcoming events, please email us whenmenopenup@gmail.com. Visit our new website, whenmenopenup.com. And we really appreciate you always tuning in. Dex, you got anything else for me?
No, hey, listen, once again, we just appreciate you guys' support. I know that this topic is, while it's very specific, I know there's a number of areas we could have gone in this. So, hey, listen, we appreciate your feedback. Even in your comment section, I believe that you can help people who might have similar questions. Even if we continue the dialogue there, I believe you can get the answers that you need. So we just want to say, as always, appreciate you guys' support.
Most definitely. And in partnership with WYTV7 Christian Broadcaster Network, this is When Men Open Up, a show where we are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique.
And I'm Dexter.
And we are out. We'll see you next week.